In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God, Amen. So as we started yesterday on our quest for where our treasure is, we came to a conclusion that the heart is what's important. The heart as the place where God is, where He exists, the place where God moves us and inspires us. The God who created us in a certain way wants to continue to engage with us. See, the beautiful thing about God is He didn't just make us and then forget us. He wants to continue to engage with us. And that's why, of course, the first verse that comes to mind when you're talking about treasures is Matthew 6:21, where your treasure is, there your heart will also be. It was nice to see the design of your poster this year with those vaults. And having a vault to symbolize your heart is a beautiful thing. Because it is where you keep the most important things to you. It's where you keep the most precious things. Now, we have precious things in our lives. We have lots of precious things. But how do we evaluate what is precious? Because surely, whatever is precious, you put in the safest place. If you have a safe in your home, or if you have that drawer that's hidden away somewhere, you have somewhere where you put treasures, precious things, memorabilia, things that mean something to you, things that have touched you, things that have certain memories related to them. But they will vary from person to person. For some people, they will be things of large material value. Jewels, precious stones, precious metals. For others, they will be things of historic value. Antiques. For others, they'll be sentimental value. Letters, cards. And for most of us, it'll be a combination of all of those. So, we all have things we treasure. But it's very important for us to evaluate ourselves first and see what it is we treasure. Because sometimes we go through life and we don't stop to ask. And we find years down the line that we've actually been treasuring the wrong things. We've been treasuring things that have occupied a space in that drawer at the exclusion of other things. So if you've had a spring cleaning, you'll open up that very valuable drawer of yours and you look at it and think, what on earth was I thinking when I put this in here? Why did I even think that was important at the time? And of course, physically, it takes up space. So you can't put other things in there. That is such a great graphic depiction of our hearts. We accumulate things along the way. We accumulate things that sometimes are of value and sometimes totally useless. But at that time, at that moment, they must have meant something, we didn't challenge it, and we've put it away. Our hearts are full of things like that sometimes. Our hearts are so full that it's no wonder at times when I feel like I want to make a difference, I want to do something new, I want to engage with God more, I want to embrace my spiritual life more, at those times, I find there's no room in my heart. My heart is so filled and preoccupied and cluttered by other things that I have no time, I have no space. And I have every intention. I engage with God and I think, Lord, I want you in my life today. And I want everything to do with you in my life. I want your word, scripture. I want to spend time with you and pray. I want to be able to engage with you. But I'm really sorry. My heart is over capacity. Anyone had the annoying message a few weeks ago, if you have an iPhone and it tells you about a new operating system and it says, do you want to download it? And you say, not again, fine, because that's all we seem to do. And you hit the button that says, sorry, you don't have enough space. Thank you for that. I'm glad, because I don't want my phone to do strange things now. But that's what happens with us. It comes that time to engage with God. And it's, do you want me in your life? And we say, yes, Lord, of course I want you. Of course I want you. I've been waiting for this time. And he comes to step in and he says, but I'm really sorry. I want to be in there. But there's just no room for me. Maybe there's no room because it's so cluttered that I can't find space. Or sometimes there's no room because I can't be in there with that. It's inconsistent. I can't be in your heart when that is in your heart. Whether it's that person, that thing, that tendency, that emotion, I can't share that space. So I want to be there, and I'm going to stand here outside your heart ready. And the minute you make space for me, and the minute you make it appropriate, I'm going to jump right in there. But I will never, ever stop being out here waiting. No one can do that for us except ourselves. 1 Corinthians 2:11 is a sobering thought. For what man knows the things of a man except the spirit of the man which is in him? Who knows you more than the spirit within you? No one. So if we're speaking about evaluating our hearts during this session, lots of people can help you in the evaluation, but no one can make the evaluation except you. You can get people's input, your spiritual father, your confession father, your servants, your good friends, people who are along the same journey. And it's very important to have that in our lives as well. Very important. But realistically, no one can make the entire evaluation except you, because no one knows you like yourself. We master a wonderful gift sometimes of deception. And you know what? Deceiving other people is the easiest thing in the world. We can all put on a mask. We can all put on a mask. Some of us are maybe putting on masks now, or when they go to work, or in certain settings, because we feel like we need to cover up certain things, or expose a different side of our character. So that's easy. What is more difficult, yet still doable, is deceiving ourselves. We can sometimes deceive ourselves temporarily, but we still know the truth. But the longer we deceive ourselves, the more that becomes our reality. And that becomes what we really believe to be ourselves. It's horrific, it is tragic. When I see young people who start to have a certain lifestyle, and they play the part, and they act it out, and you know that it's artificial and superficial, but over time, they actually embrace it, and it becomes who they are. They deceive even themselves into becoming someone else. So it's easy to deceive others, It is difficult, yet still doable, to deceive ourselves, but it is impossible to deceive God. Because He looks straight into us. And usually when you say that, people are scared. You know, you're like the little child who doesn't want to do anything wrong because you can't get away from your mom because she'll always know. Right? But that's not what you should be feeling at the idea that you can't deceive God. It's actually a beautiful thing that you can't deceive God. Because at the risk of not being very poetic and maybe not the best example, but I'm going to use it anyway, we're like onions. I bet no one's ever said that to you before. We have layers, and we keep peeling those layers away. And it's not inconsistent with the imagery that sometimes peeling the layers away makes you tear up. Right? You peel the layers away, one layer after the other. And some layers, the outside may be very good, then you get into a couple of bad layers, then maybe a few good layers, because it's accumulated over time. It's who we want to be, and our development becomes cumulative. When God looks, He doesn't stop at layers. He goes straight to the core. And the beautiful thing about that is the core is what He created, which is His image and likeness in us. So the fact that He can see through us should not be a frightening thing, should be an encouraging thing. Because the minute He looks at us, after we have gone away and squandered His wealth on prodigal living, and attached ourselves to a citizen of that land, and were in the mud tending swine, and desiring to eat the pods, yet no one would give us any, and we come to ourselves, and we go to Him, and we're scruffy, and we're dirty, and He looks at us, He doesn't see any of that. He sees His child returning. So it is good that we can't deceive Him, because He always sees what He has created, and He reminds us of who we really are. Speaking of the prodigal son, some of you may be aware of the Rembrandt that was drawn of the prodigal son. It's a beautiful painting, and I was just in Moscow last week with His Holiness, and they took us to the Hermitage Museum, and I was so shocked to see the actual original of that painting. It's huge, and if you've seen a print of it, it's lovely, but when you see the original, huge painting by Rembrandt of the prodigal son, and you look at the expression of the father, it's still not enough to tell you how God feels when we return to Him. Because when He evaluates our hearts, He looks at what was there in the first place and then compares it to what's there now. So He reminds us what it looked like and what we can return it to, rather than us just working with what it is now. From that we see that God is primarily concerned with the state of our hearts. Because where your heart is, there where your treasure is. And where your treasure is, that's where your heart is. They're mutually compatible. Because when you look at your heart, you put it with your valuables, and your values are put in your heart, if you're going to deal with it properly. St. Gregory the theologian says, there are three things that God requires of all the baptized. He says, the right faith in the heart, truth on the tongue, and temperance in the body. So God wants three things of us. The first thing is, He wants to have the right faith in our hearts, because when we have that, that becomes our treasure. And if that's our treasure, in evaluating that heart, then it brings truth in the tongue. Because we're told that out of the treasures we have, that's where our actions and words come from. We often say horrible things. And the justification we have for some people is, it's okay, he's really a nice person, but he just says these things. She's just a nice person, but she just can't herself sometimes. It's nice for us to use that as a justification for other people, make excuses for them. But don't ever take it as an excuse for yourself. Because what you say, what you do, comes from that place inside you. And so even if it's not fully corrupted, it is a manifestation, no matter how small, of what is in the heart. It's a manifestation. Don't excuse yourself. Excuse others. Don't judge others. But judge yourself and judge your heart. Not harshly, not to condemn yourself, but to make yourself better. We always talk about constructive criticism to others. Yet for ourselves, we sometimes go into extremes. Either we justify everything for ourselves, and that's very destructive, or we are so harsh on ourselves and we condemn ourselves destructively, not constructively, destructively. And that also doesn't work. What we should do in evaluating that heart, however, looking at what treasure is inside it, is saying, okay, where am I really now? Where am I? What's in my heart? What's filling my heart? What's there? What's taking up space? You are all at a stage of your lives now where I am sure you are extremely busy. Time is such a precious commodity. And it's not just time. Time is a precious commodity, but so also is your concentration and your interest. And whether we like to admit it or not, you will prioritize. So how do you prioritize your time? Is the spiritual component anything to do with that? Is God being there anything to do with that? Is your time with Him and your prayer or scripture, time of reflection, is it there? Do we make those choices? Because you will make those choices. And you all struggle. The number of people I sit with and say, I really want to, but I don't have time. And I don't doubt that. I'm not going to give you the standard line of, yeah, but if you wanted to, you could make time, because some of you actually don't have time. And I understand that. You are pushed at every level. You don't have time. And so sometimes it's not about trying to find more time. It's about prioritizing what we're doing. Are there things I'm doing? Are there things that are preoccupying my heart that I don't need? Things that I can do away with. Things that maybe I just don't need to worry about. We deal with our lives and our hearts and our attention spans as if they are infinite, but they're not infinite. They're very finite. And in examining my heart, I need to examine where its limits are. Where are the limits of my time and my attention and my focus? Proverbs 21:2. Every way of a man or a woman is right in his or her own eyes, but the Lord weighs the heart. So if I look at my life and everything I do, everything looks right. Everything looks doable. Everything looks like it's important. I can justify anything to myself. If you look at the most difficult, despicable criminals in the history of humanity, everything they have done, I am sure, is completely within their own minds, justified. Absolutely. When we do something wrong, we justify it. If I lie, if I steal, if I defame, if I gossip, if I hurt, I'll justify it. Either the person deserved it, or I couldn't help myself, or it was a bad day, or I just didn't have the energy, or, well, they did this first. Everything is justifiable. But the real evaluation of the heart comes with God weighing it for us. Because he has a very fine touch. He has a very fine touch. And because he is perfect, he's able to separate out perfection from imperfection. So when he looks at my heart, and I have justified things for myself, he'll say, but no, that really is not justified. That really shouldn't have happened. This should not be acceptable in any way. That is not the way you should be living. And so on and so forth. So, we can justify things, but God will weigh them up. And Jeremiah 17:9 also warns us, says, the heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. So the heart, as we use it, if it's not judged and measured and weighed by God, is deceitful and is wicked. But only if that is what we fill it with. The heart is beautiful. And for all of you medics out there, I've got to say that, we're not talking about the physical muscle, right? Just because that would be very distressing. But the heart as the symbol of our feeling and loving nature within us, it is created as beautiful by God. When we are created in the image and likeness of God, we are created with the mind of God and the heart of God. So that heart is the same heart that created us and then came to save us. So it is beautifully generous at the outset and then beautifully forgiving even when things go wrong. That's the heart of God. But when we corrupt it, we make it deceitful and we make it wicked. So it needs to go back to the way it was. How do we send it back there? Of course, the best answer is, let God do it for you. But for most of us, that means absolutely nothing. It's a textbook answer that may not be taken on board. It sounds good, theoretically, hypothetically, but actually, in reality, what does that even mean? It means two things. It means, first of all, let God directly help you in evaluating your heart by spending time with him, by being in his presence, by sharing your life and your thoughts with him. Because then he'll help you sift out the good from the evil, the constructive from the destructive, the life from the death. Because he gives us that insight. Spending time with a peaceful person, you always think, I feel better now. Hearing a peaceful voice, rather than someone who's shouting at you and speaking really fast and all the time and not stopping. Not that anyone here would do that at all. I was on a flight once. It was an 8-hour flight. And I had this one saintly woman behind me. I say saintly because I can't say the other adjectives I wanted to use. And she was sitting behind me. I promise you, she didn't stop for a minute. It was an overnight flight. It was the same pitch of voice, at the same tone, with the same consistency. I thought, do you breathe? I was expecting someone to come with a gas mask, with an oxygen mask, and say, no, no, please, just you're going blue. Getting off the plane, the most disturbing thing is getting off the plane, I could still hear her voice. But it's very different to having someone who speaks calmly and peacefully to your spirit. And that's what the voice of God is. Spend time with Him. Be exposed to Him. Let Him speak to your heart. The other thing, of course, is to utilize things that God gives us, like people around us. We're always very quick to condemn people as being a bad example and a bad influence, and surely we should get over that by the time we're 14, 15, blaming our friends. But I'm sure there are lots of very good people in your lives who can have a great influence, and you can be a great influence in theirs, and it spirals. I find it disturbing, whether it's your age group or a little bit younger, that some relationships are quite destructive. And it's a spiral of destruction. So you have someone who is okay and wants a sort of a good direction. Someone says, well, why don't we do this? And then we sort of bounce off each other and it spirals down. Whereas the same two people could actually help each other and spiral up and build each other and support each other and input positively into each other's lives. So that's the second reason. That's the second way we know. Proverbs 25. Counsel in the heart of man is like deep water. But the man of understanding will draw it out. It's not easy. It's not easy to evaluate our hearts. And yes, it's like deep water. Deep water. We sometimes can't get to it. But if we're calm, and we're wise, and we're understanding, we can get to the bottom and draw it out. Now let's keep going with the imagery. What makes it more difficult to find things in that deep water? First of all, if the water is moving, it's got a current, and it moves and you can't see, and you're just dipping your hand in and grabbing without knowing where you're going. So often, that water needs to be calm. Our lives need to be calm. I cannot evaluate my heart in mayhem. Mayhem is not a time for evaluation, because I will always end up with the wrong result. Or I'll end up wasting a lot of time doing nothing. Mayhem is a time for peace. Time for tranquility, time for calmness. When my heart, when my life gets so hectic and so fast and so furious, it's not a good time to be searching my heart. Step one, and that's why we're dealing with today's talks in this order. Step one is to evaluate my heart. But I can't evaluate it without calm. So I need calm. And that calm comes from taking a step out, a step away. Taking a couple of hours, half a day, whatever you can do, that says, I've got to slow down. And once you slow down, then you get a clearer picture. The second component is you can't have someone stomping through your calm water all the time and creating ripples in it and muddying it for you. So A, that quiet time needs to be on your own, and B, when you decide to share it with others, make sure they're the right people. Make sure they are people who will help you calm that water. Who won't dredge up mud and just muddy that water. Because you know what? In our lives, things settle. But there are people in our lives who will keep trying to dredge things up. and just muddy it all over again. Do you remember what she said? Do you remember what he did? Do you remember that time? I don't want to remember those things. I've spent days, months, years trying to forget. Because I need that stillness and that calmness. I need my heart to be healed. I don't want to remember those things. So leave me. Leave me to be able to find healing, to find peace. Because if I remember those things, they make me angry. They make me upset. They make me feel sorry for myself. They make me hate others. You're not helping me. You're saying you're a friend, but you're not helping me. So find people who will allow you and even help you to find those still waters through which you can find the wisdom of your heart. God never gives up on us. He looks and he searches our hearts, and he knows what there is. But he never gives up. Jeremiah 17:10 is a very, very clear message. I, the Lord, search the heart. That's it. I, the Lord, search the heart. 6 words that guarantee you what God does. And often we will think he searches our hearts to condemn us. But actually he searches our hearts to bring forth the reality of the beauty that he's created. And to reassure us. To reassure us that that beauty still exists. And it's still there. And it's still within me to live it and to achieve greater and greater things. 1 Peter 3 is something we touched upon very briefly last night. In God searching our hearts, he doesn't search them cosmetically. He searches them with depth. And St. Peter in his first epistle says, do not let your adornment be merely outward, arranging the hair, wearing gold, and putting on fine apparel. Don't let adornment just be that, because for us, adornment becomes that. Because that's all people see. Well, actually, no. If they are wise people, if they are smart people, they see much deeper. You can adorn the outward as much as you want. But people still will somehow be able to see into your heart. So don't just occupy yourself with the outside. He says, do not let your adornment be merely outward, arranging the hair, wearing gold, or putting on fine apparel. Rather, let it be the hidden person of the heart. Adorn yourself with looking for the hidden person of the heart, with the incorruptible beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which is very precious in the sight of God. That's the real beauty. That's the real adornment. And that makes sense. Because the spirit that God created in us, with its incorruptible beauty, gentle and quiet spirit, if we focus on that, then it becomes outward. And that's what people see. I've met many people in my life who don't really adorn themselves outwardly, haven't arranged their hair, haven't been wearing gold, and didn't have fine apparel. But the beauty, the incorruptible beauty, and the gentle and quiet spirit within them screams. And that's all you can see. That's all you touch. It's all you feel. Because that's what speaks loudest. That quietness and gentleness is very important, because it offsets anxiety that we have in our lives. And we all have different forms of anxiety. Proverbs 12:25 again says, anxiety in the heart of man causes depression, but a good word makes it glad. So the anxiety we feel, and of course, this was written a long time ago, so it doesn't, when it says depression, it's not speaking of the clinical use of the term we have now, it's very specialized. But what it means is it brings us down. It depresses us, it puts pressure on us. It brings us down to a different level. Because if we bear anxiety, we're forced down by it. The Spirit of God is uplifting. Anxiousness and anxiety bring us down. I want to close with this one passage from St. Anthony the Great. He says, virtue has need at our hand of willingness alone, since it is in us and is formed from us. For when the soul has its spirit, faculty, in a natural state of virtue, that is formed. So when my soul is in a natural state, that's when virtue comes up. Virtue comes from willingness, but also from that ability to embrace it. And it is in a natural state when it remains as it came into existence. So when our heart is a natural state in which it is created, then virtue can be found in it without us having corrupted it. And when it came into existence, it was fair and exceedingly honest. Our heart, when it was created, was fair and honest. And so therefore, it was filled with fairness, honesty, beauty, righteousness. He goes on to say, make straight your heart to the Lord God of Israel. Make your path straight, for in that you will return to the state in which it was created. Sum it up. St. Anthony, as a monk, as the first monk, as the one who left the world and went into wilderness to be with God, wanted to find that initial state of the heart of God, the state that he created. And he says, the heart was created perfect, pure, good. We need to take out of it everything that doesn't belong and return it to that state, because in that state we'll be able to grow, because that's how it was intended. That's how God wanted us to use it. And in that state we can see the full beauty of God, because that's the way it was created. So in evaluating our hearts, we need to spend time and look at what our heart was, where it is now, and what it should return to. Because evaluation without a comprehension of the reality of the original state of the heart is a flawed evaluation. What am I comparing it to? What am I testing it against? Because I can look at my heart today and think, that looks fine. It's fine. I'm not having killed anyone. I'm not doing anything that serious. And a number of people who say that, it drives me insane. Yeah, no, I don't, and they say it jokingly, but it's also, you can see it's very defensive. Yeah, I haven't killed anyone. Well, great. That's a great threshold, As long as you haven't done that, you must be okay. Because I think when God created us, it's not quite the litmus test for righteousness and good living. But if we compare it against what it was, then we know what we need to return to. The image, the beauty, the faithfulness that God created in us, and that He still sees in us until today. And glory be to God forever. Amen.